On the afternoon of Sunday, August 2nd, 2026, the same storm system triggered tornado warnings on both sides of an international border within minutes of each other. The National Weather Service in Buffalo issued a tornado warning for western Niagara County, New York, at 12:40 p.m. Eastern Time, covering Niagara Falls, Grand Island, Lewiston, and several surrounding communities. Across the river, Environment Canada issued its own red-level tornado warning for St. Catharines and Niagara Falls, Ontario, around the same window. Two countries, one storm cell, two separate national weather agencies, independently flagging the same rotating system as it crossed one of the most famous stretches of water in North America. Here's exactly what the official bulletin said, because the specific language matters. The National Weather Service's warning described a severe thunderstorm capable of producing a tornado located near Niagara Falls, moving east at roughly 30 miles per hour, with radar indicating rotation within the storm. The hazard listed was tornado, the source was radar-indicated rotation, and the impact statement warned that flying debris would be dangerous to anyone caught without shelter, with expected damage to mobile homes, roofs, windows, vehicles, and trees. That warning carried an EAS activation, meaning it triggered emergency alerts directly to cell phones in the warned area, urging people to take cover immediately in a basement or interior room on the lowest floor of a sturdy building. It's worth being precise about what radar-indicated rotation actually means. It means Doppler radar detected the specific circular wind pattern associated with tornado formation within the storm, not that a tornado was visually confirmed on the ground by a trained spotter or automated camera. That distinction is exactly why these warnings exist in the first place. Radar can detect the conditions capable of producing a tornado and issuing a warning immediately, rather than waiting for visual confirmation, is what actually gives people time to take shelter before anything touches down. The storm didn't arrive without warning signs building through the morning. Roughly 8 minutes before the tornado warning, the National Weather Service had already issued a severe thunderstorm warning for the same general area, describing 60-mile-per-hour wind gusts and penny-sized hail moving toward Niagara Falls, North Tonawanda, Lockport, and Amherst. A separate special marine warning covered the Niagara River and the stretch of Lake Ontario near the river's mouth, specifically citing severe thunderstorms capable of producing waterspouts, tornado-strength rotation occurring directly over open water, moving northeast across the lake. Waterspouts form through essentially the same mechanism as their land-based counterparts, a rotating column of air extending down from a storm cloud to the water's surface. And while they're often weaker than tornadoes that form and remain entirely over land, a waterspout that moves on shore, sometimes called a landspout in that transition, carries the same hazards as any other tornado once it crosses onto solid ground. On the Canadian side, Environment Canada's warning covered a broader area, including Niagara, Hamilton, Burlington, and Bradford, with the tornado-specific warning centered on St. Catharines and Niagara Falls, Ontario. According to CBC News reporting, the tornado warning triggered an emergency alert on cell phones in the area shortly before 1 p.m., and a wild storm swept through the north end of Niagara Falls, Ontario, bringing pounding rain, extremely poor visibility, howling winds, and power outages. Environment Canada lifted the tornado warnings relatively soon afterward as the storm's rotation weakened below the threshold that had triggered the alert. The National Weather Service similarly allowed the western Niagara County warning to expire at 1:15 p.m., less than 35 minutes after it was first issued, after the storm weakened below severe limits and no longer appeared capable of producing a tornado. It helps to understand the actual mechanism behind how a storm generates the kind of rotation that triggers a tornado warning in the first place. Severe thunderstorms capable of producing tornadoes typically develop what meteorologists call a mesocyclone, a rotating column of air within the storm itself, usually forming when winds at different altitudes are blowing at different speeds and directions, a condition called wind shear. That difference in wind behavior at different heights can tilt a horizontally rotating tube of air into a vertical orientation, feeding it into the thunderstorm's updraft, where it tightens and intensifies the way a spinning ice skater speeds up by pulling their arms inward. Doppler radar detects this rotation directly by measuring the velocity of precipitation and debris being carried within the storm, which is exactly the radar-indicated rotation signature referenced in this past Sunday's National Weather Service bulletin. Not every mesocyclone produces an actual tornado reaching the ground. Some remain aloft within the storm and never fully develop a connection to the surface, which is part of why this past Sunday's warning described the tornado as radar-indicated rather than confirmed, and why the situation can change within minutes as a storm either strengthens that rotation toward the ground or weakens and loses it entirely, which is ultimately what happened here as both warnings expired within roughly half an hour to 35 minutes of being issued. If you want to stay current on fast-developing regional weather events like this one as they unfold, that's exactly the kind of coverage this channel focuses on, so consider subscribing if you haven't already. This region also has real recent history with tornadoes worth knowing about. In August of 2024, a tornado tore through downtown Buffalo, New York, just across the county from this past Sunday's warning area, damaging multiple buildings and ripping the roof off a structure on Niagara Street itself, with video capturing the funnel coming ashore off Lake Erie. That event caused significant property damage, though thankfully no injuries were reported. It's a useful recent reminder that this broader Niagara and western New York region, while not typically associated with tornado activity the way the Central Plains states are, genuinely does see tornado-producing storms with some regularity, particularly during the summer months when lake-driven instability combines with the kind of broader atmospheric setup capable of generating severe convective weather. There's important context behind why this particular storm hit this particular region as hard as it did. According to CBC News, this wasn't an isolated event for the Niagara area. The tornado warnings on both sides of the border came less than a week after St. Catharines and Niagara on the Lake were deluged with torrential rainfall that caused significant flooding and damage. That means the ground across the region was already saturated heading into this past Sunday's storm, which compounds flooding risk considerably. Saturated soil can't absorb additional rainfall the way drier ground would, meaning runoff and flash flooding tend to escalate faster during a second heavy rain event arriving on top of an already soaked landscape. It's worth understanding why the Niagara region specifically tends to see this kind of severe convective weather, because the geography here isn't incidental. The area sits at the western end of Lake Ontario, close enough to Lake Erie as well, that lake effect dynamics play a genuine role in local storm behavior even outside of winter. Large bodies of water influence the atmosphere above and around them by moderating temperature and adding moisture. And when a warm, humid air mass interacts with the temperature contrast near these lake shorelines, it can provide additional instability and moisture for storms to draw on as they move through the region. The Niagara River itself, connecting Lake Erie to Lake Ontario, sits directly in a corridor where storm systems frequently track from west to east, which is part of why both American and Canadian communities along this specific stretch of water tend to experience severe weather events on the same afternoon, as happened this past Sunday, rather than the storm affecting only one side of the border. This event also fits into a broader pattern of active severe weather across North America this year. Weather tracking services have noted that 2026's tornado count nationally has shown a notable regional shift, with tornado activity running well above typical levels in states like Illinois while running below typical levels in traditional tornado corridor states like Texas. A reminder that severe convective weather patterns can shift geographically from year to year based on the broader atmospheric setup, rather than concentrating in the same regions annually. This summer has also seen sustained heat dome conditions across parts of the western United States, contributing to expanding wildfire activity in that region, even as the eastern half of the continent deals with an active pattern of severe thunderstorms, heavy rainfall, and flash flooding, illustrating how differently the same general time period can play out across different parts of the same continent. As of the most recent reporting, no fatalities or serious injuries have been confirmed in connection with this past Sunday's tornado warnings specifically, though the storm did bring documented power outages, hail, and damaging wind gusts to the region. Given how quickly conditions can change with this kind of event, and how close together the American and Canadian warnings were issued and then lifted, the situation was one worth continuing to monitor as local authorities completed damage assessments in the days that followed. It's worth understanding the broader distinction between a tornado watch and a tornado warning, since the terminology gets used inconsistently in casual conversation, but means something very specific in official meteorology. A watch means conditions are favorable for tornadoes to develop across a broader area over the coming hours. It's a heads up to stay alert and monitor conditions, not an indication that a tornado is imminent at any specific location. A warning, like the ones issued this past Sunday for Niagara Falls on both sides of the border, means a tornado has either been confirmed or radar has detected the specific signature associated with one actively forming, and it calls for immediate action rather than continued monitoring. Warnings are typically issued with very little lead time, sometimes only minutes, precisely because the atmospheric conditions capable of producing a tornado can develop and intensify rapidly within an already severe thunderstorm, which is exactly what happened this past Sunday. A warning issued at 12:32 p.m. for damaging wind and hail escalated into a full tornado warning just 8 minutes later as the storm's rotation became apparent on radar. It's also worth understanding why so much of North America has been dealing with this kind of active, volatile weather simultaneously this summer. A persistent heat dome, a large area of high pressure trapping hot air in place for extended periods, has been sitting over parts of the western United States for weeks, driving both dangerous heat and expanding wildfire activity across that region. Meanwhile, the eastern half of the continent has been under a very different pattern, one more conducive to the kind of moisture-rich, unstable atmosphere that fuels severe thunderstorms, heavy rainfall, and tornado-warned storms, like the one that moved through Niagara Falls this past Sunday. These aren't unrelated phenomena happening by coincidence. The same broader atmospheric configuration, essentially where the jet stream is positioned and how it's shaped across the continent, tends to simultaneously lock a ridge of high pressure and heat over one region while directing a more active, storm-prone pattern into another. That's part of why a single summer can produce headlines about wildfire smoke in one part of the country and tornado warnings in another within the same news cycle. Both are downstream consequences of the same large-scale atmospheric pattern currently in place. If a tornado from this storm is ultimately confirmed to have touched down, meteorologists will assess its strength using the enhanced Fujita scale, a system that doesn't measure a tornado's wind speed directly with an instrument, since getting a wind sensor directly in a tornado's path is exceptionally rare, but instead estimates strength based on the specific type and severity of damage left behind. The scale runs from EF0, with winds starting around 65 miles per hour, causing minor damage like broken tree branches and damaged chimneys, up through EF5, with winds exceeding 200 miles per hour, capable of leveling well-built houses entirely and stripping bark from trees. National Weather Service damage survey teams typically visit the affected area in person within a day or two of an event like this one, examining the specific pattern of destruction, which direction debris was thrown, how trees were snapped versus uprooted, how buildings failed, to assign both a confirmed rating and a specific path length and width for the historical record. That survey process is also how a storm initially described as radar indicated gets either upgraded to a confirmed tornado with an official rating, or in some cases downgraded to straight-line wind damage from the thunderstorm itself, since severe straight-line winds can sometimes produce damage that looks similar to tornado damage from a distance without any actual rotation reaching the ground. It's also worth understanding that radar isn't the only tool feeding into a warning decision like the ones issued Sunday. The National Weather Service maintains a nationwide network of trained volunteer storm spotters, ordinary members of the public who complete official spotter training and then report what they're directly observing during severe weather back to their local forecast office, often faster than radar alone can confirm a developing tornado. This human observation network exists specifically because radar has real limitations. It can detect rotation within a storm, but can't always distinguish a tornado that has fully reached the ground from rotation, still contained higher up in the cloud, and it can also be affected by terrain blocking the radar beam, or by the curvature of the Earth itself, reducing resolution at greater distances from the radar site. A spotter reporting a visible funnel cloud or confirmed tornado on the ground gives forecasters a second, independent line of evidence they can combine with what radar is showing, and in many cases across the country, spotter reports have led to warnings being issued faster, or continued longer, than radar data alone would have supported. Whether any spotter reports came in during Sunday's Niagara Falls warnings specifically wasn't detailed in the initial bulletins, but this dual system of radar detection, plus human observation, is the standard operating procedure behind essentially every tornado warning issued anywhere in the United States and Canada. The Niagara Falls area carries some specific vulnerabilities worth understanding when a storm like this moves through. This is one of the most visited tourist destinations in North America, drawing millions of visitors annually to view the falls themselves from both the American and Canadian sides, meaning a severe weather event here doesn't just threaten permanent residents, it can catch a large transient population of visitors outdoors, often unfamiliar with local shelter locations, at exactly the wrong moment. The region's infrastructure includes extensive hydroelectric power generation, drawing directly from the Niagara River, some of the oldest continuously operating power infrastructure in North America, alongside the tourist-focused development clustered near the falls themselves. Local emergency management on both sides of the border coordinates specifically around this mixed population of residents and visitors, which is part of why the wireless emergency alerts pushed to cell phones during both the American and Canadian tornado warnings matter so much. They reach anyone with a phone in the warned area, regardless of whether that person lives locally or is visiting for the day, without requiring them to already be monitoring local news or weather radio. We'll continue tracking any updates on damage assessments and storm reports from the Niagara region as they become available. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.